Welcome to On the Brink Radio. This is Jeff Phillips Wefferson here in the beautiful forest off the Red Road in the Punapahoa area of the Big Island of Hawai'I. Very pleased to have Lindafaye Kroll with us today. Thank you for coming. So tell us, how did you come to be here now?
I came to Hawaii in 1991, and in 1993 I learned the real history here. It was the 100th anniversary of the unlawful overthrow, or invasion is actually a better word, of the Kingdom of Hawaii. And in the 100th year anniversary in 1993, the President of the United States signed Public Law 103-150, formally apologizing to the Hawaiian people for invading their country. Doesn't mean they're going to give the country back. And there is a big movement. When I learned the truth here, I got very involved in politics and Hawaiian history, studied with a Hawaiian kapuna, learning the history and contract law.
What was their name?
Norman Gonzalez. And in any case, studied with him for 3 years and did a lateral move from the Hawaiian history, because the Hawaiians, the Kanaka Maoli, the First Nation people here, they have to work it out. They have the inherent right. It was their country that was invaded. I am an American colonist. Like I said, I came over under work contract in 1991 in nursing and never left. I'm one of those colonists that never left. I am now...
The land liked you or loved you, or else you wouldn't be here.
Actually, it's the issue that I got all wrapped up in. When you learn the true history here and how the First Nation people, the Kanaka Maoli, have been shoved aside, suppressed, oppressed, talked to elders where they would get their knuckles cracked if they spoke Hawaiian in school.
The age-old story, same with Native Americans, same with Indigenous Australians?
Yes. And that's very sad. And even though I'm a Euro-American...
We're not exactly white, though, are we?
Well, I would have to think that there's probably, according to my family, would be skeletons in the closet with some color going on. I've been accused of having a little slant to my eyes.
Well, but my skin's not white. I'm beige. I'm a beige man with orange speckles.
Yeah, you're pretty red, and I bet you sunburn really well too. But in any case, it was. I'm a humanitarian. I'm a Christian. Was raised a Christian, and the whole philosophy of
the golden
people
rule.
Less fortunate. You help those less fortunate. So the Hawaii story kind of really changed my life. And my life focus.
Did this hit you like right when you first came, or did it sort of sink in over a period of time?
1993, when 10,000 people peacefully marched on Honolulu, opened my eyes. I didn't get involved in the subject until about 96. And I was a volunteer educator for the Puna district of the reinstated Hawaiian government. And I did that for a while, and after a time, I just felt it was best that the uncles work it out themselves. Because I'm not Kanaka, I'm a foreigner, I'm a colonist, I'm a settler. And through studying this history over the last 15 years, I've been here 25 now. Through the last 15 years, I'm now Hawaiian national. I was so ashamed to be an American after I read that Public Law 103-150, the formal apology resolution. I was ashamed to be an American, so I stopped being an American. I mean, I'm still an American.
But you're a planetary citizen.
I am a planetary citizen, and if there was a government that I would choose, it would be that I'm a Hawaiian national waiting for the government to come back. It is coming back. There are many, many, many factions of people that are working on bringing the United States to justice for the crimes against humanity right here in Hawaii. Now, in 2003, my focus changed to military toxics. I started studying military toxics.
From a biomedical perspective.
that was my main interest because I am a registered nurse and I have had statistics and health statistics and some public health training. But in 2005, I was sent to an international military toxics conference in San Antonio, Texas.
What year was that?
2005.
Really? So after the Gulf War? Long
Yes.
after.
Yes. And when I studied military toxics from 2003 to 2008, I was mainly studying Gulf War I. Though Gulf War II, and in that focus, well, it was this international military toxics conference that brought my focus to depleted uranium. Now, I wasn't considering depleted uranium as a pollutant in Hawaii because when I read the military EIS, the environmental impact statement, they said they would not ever use, store, or transport radioactive munitions in the islands. And I took that for it being the truth. My eyes weren't quite open yet. When I went to this international military toxics conference, Vieques, Puerto Rico, I think they got the military decommissioned there in about 2001. And what the people in Vieques did is they did their own independent studies, and they only had the U.S. Navy using their island as target practice for 50 years, with people actually living on the island.
Probably so they could study them too.
I don't know about the studies on the military side, but the independent testing that the Vieques people uncovered, I studied those results for 3 days in this 3-day international conference. In this conference, I met people with PhDs from all over the Pacific Rim. Guam was represented, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, and these Vieques people, of course, is a territory of the United States. And I hadn't done any health statistics here in Hawaii yet, but I had that information from the Vieques studies. And when I came back in near the end of 2005 and started studying the health statistics, I found that we had the same health problems as the people in Vieques who had just one branch of the military bombing them for 50 years. Now, since World War II, the military presence in the islands has increased exponentially.
Do you mean the Hawaiian Islands?
In the Hawaiian Islands has
Yes.
increased exponentially.
And it's not letting up either, is it?
It doesn't seem to be letting up. And in every 3 years, now I live on the Hawaii island Moku Okeawe, and the live fire training that we have here is called Pohakaloa Training Area. It's in the heart of this big island, and it's between 3 sacred mountains. It's kind of like the Hawaiians consider it the womb of this island.
What, can you name the 3 mountains?
Oh, Holly. Now I'm gonna get it wrong. The one in Kona, but it's Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa are the two main ones.
It's like Hualapi or something like that. It's Hualapi.
I'm
something.
I'm embarrassing myself.
But something like
You
that.
can cut that part out.
That's all right.
Edit. Sorry. Anyway, so I mainly studied, and every 3 years they changed the commanders up there, and after 6-8 years, realizing that the next commander is going to repeat rhetoric from previous commanders, and they will lie to continue their warring mission. They have fed us a lot of misinformation using, I'm not saying that they don't use science, they do, but
Science
they
created
don't use complete science.
Science created the atomic bomb.
Yeah, there we go. So they use science plenty. In any case, in the end of 2005, through a Freedom of Information Act, an activist group on Oahu forced the military to admit that they had indeed contaminated us with depleted uranium. Now, they're only admitting to depleted uranium used in a spotting round on a small nuclear device called a Davy Crockett. No kidding, this is a nuclear device that they were testing in the 60s where a vet could carry a nuke in a backpack, pop it on a tripod, and send off a nuke.
like launch it like a bazooka or something, or
Except it's bigger than a bazooka, and it's a small nuke.
for real in the 60s.
For real. In the
I never
60s,
heard of that
it's called
before.
the Davy Crockett. And the spotting round is made of depleted uranium. And that's all they're admitting to is thousands and thousands of these little spotting rounds in practice trajectory to see where this nuke would go. They would, of course, have not admitted that they've released any nuclear weapons here.
Of course not. If they even hinted at it, it would open up a mega flood of liability claims and stuff.
That's right. So the commanders keep their lips pretty zipped. Now, one of our researchers, this is an interesting little tidbit of information, one of our researchers got one of the commanders to admit that they did not actually prohibit depleted uranium weapons on a live fire training range until 1996. Wow. Now, okay. They've admitted that the spotting rounds, and there are thousands of them, they don't even know how many there are, from the 1960s to, okay, that's over 30 years. So, in the last 13 years of my involvement in this issue, all we've really wanted them to do is complete assessment of where the depleted uranium is and air testing to see if any of this radioactivity is drifting off the live fire training range, and they will do neither of those things. And 14 years now I've been involved in this subject.
Well, is it possible and or doable to perform these kind of tests on our own using other credible scientific instruments or people?
We are working toward that. There are many groups. I work alone for the most part. I work with other groups, but I'm not involved in any one group. It's like a supportive effort, say on the fringe. Anyway, I know of other groups that are working on the independent testing. The biggest stumbling block for this is money. The testing that we really need is air testing. Now, we are in agreement with the military about the solid form of depleted uranium in its natural state, even though when they call it depleted when the nuclear industry takes out U-234 and U-235. That's what atomic bombs are made out of and what they use in nuclear reactors. What's left over is 99% depleted because these other elements are removed. But it's still radioactive. It's a low-level radioactivity. Now the problem begins, and we're in agreement with the military on the science thus far. Are most concerned, it gives off alpha, beta, and gamma radiation, and we're most concerned about it being an alpha emitter. And
that's the one that you can ingest, right?
Well, I can get to that more thoroughly in a little bit because understanding when they depleted uranium outside the body is not a problem. Here we go. Oh, nope, that rock is stuck. Well, anyway, if I had a chunk, oh, here we go. Chunk of depleted uranium. It's really a piece of lava. Outside the body, the alpha radiation doesn't go very far. It can be blocked with a piece of paper. It can be blocked. The outer layer of our skin is dead. It'll be blocked by that. The alpha radiation is not that dangerous. It's still low-level radiation. You're still getting exposed to a low-level radiation. But the problem begins is when they take this depleted uranium and turn it into a weapon. Now, they love it as a weapon because on impact, it will burst into flames without explosives. It's just the actual, just the impact, it'll go through metal like butter and burst into flames. When it does that, there's a chemical change that goes on.
It's pyrophoric.
It's pyrophoric, and it's the impact that makes it explode because of the density of it, I guess. In any case, when it burns, part of that will be aerosolized, and it'll just go in the air. Now, it's a heavy metal, so if it were to break up into smaller parts, it could fall back down to Earth. And this is their argument. They say it's too heavy to become airborne, but they're not considering it if it's aerosolized. We're talking tiny, tiny, minute particles.
Would those be nanoparticles?
Nanoparticles. They could be nanoparticles. I'm not a scientist here, but the dangerous part about these little tiny particles of dust, they really, they're even smaller than dust. If that's inhaled, our lungs are living tissue. That this microscopic particle comes in contact with living tissue, it will kill it, period. That's how powerful this little particle is. So why worry? We have trillions and trillions of cells. You got one little particle floating around. Now, the other thing about it being, they call it an oxide after it's been burnt. So it's a different chemical being, a chemical element. And the military absolutely refuses to even go down that road. And this is why we want air testing, because if one speck of this gets in your lungs, it can stay in your body for 6 decades. Whereas natural uranium dust, if it were filed and there was dust, or like around the mining, a lot of the kids end up playing in the tailings around the uranium mines. But it's still a heavy metal. It's still not a real healthy thing to have in your body. But the depleted uranium, before it's a weapon, if the dust gets in you, it could be flushed out of your system in 6 weeks. It will. Now, a lot of uranium miners die of cancer, but you got to look at what their exposure is. If they're in uranium mines 40 hours a week, breathing this stuff, it's still low-level radioactivity. It's not as dangerous as when they change the depleted uranium to an oxide by burning it. It's like turning clay into a ceramic.
Yes.
It's different.
Is it true that our exposure to these ionizing radiations, that has at the cellular and genetic level, it has a cumulative effect over your lifetime? That it's like you don't get an exposure and then it just goes away. Your exposures, they add on to all the ones that you've had earlier in your life, right?
There isn't any form of radiation that's healthy for us. Human beings are not built that way. Now, I've been up at Pohakaloa 4 times that I know of with people that have had Geiger counters with us. And every time we've gone up there, we don't get outrageous high readings of radioactivity. Normal background radioactivity on a Geiger counter is 5 to 20 counts per minute. And you go up in elevation, you're going to expect higher readings. So a normal background radiation up in the mountains would be 18 to 20. That's normal background radiation. Every time we've been up there, we've gotten radiation readings that are 25, that are 65. The highest was on May 29th. I remember this day because it alarmed all of us. We had a radiation spike of 75 counts per minute. Now that stayed suspended on the air. We had 2 Geiger counters and they were both reading elevated radiation. And that for several minutes, and then finally the wind subsided. And slowly the Geiger counters went back down to a normal reading. So you're getting spikes of some kind of radiation, but it's coming off of the live fire training range up there at Pohakaloa. So I've been exposed. Now the biggest danger with this kind of radiation, other people have asked about, well, visitors aren't going to want to come to Hawaii if they know you're radioactive. The point with this kind of radiation, it's most dangerous to children about to be born. If a mother were to inhale this and if it were to circulate in her body and get to the fetus, that fetus could have birth defects. The children born, children and elderly, this is the number one thing you learn in nursing. It's most of the people that we take care of are children or the elderly. When you have less resistance to fight, all the people in between are pretty healthy people. You have examples, or you have exceptions to that rule. But mainly, with this kind of radiation, my concern as a registered nurse is children being exposed to this. Now, Pohakaloa training area isn't really near any big developments or people even. It's kind of isolated up there in a high desert. The problem is these mountains create a perfect wind tunnel. You can never go through Pohakaloa, or the Saddle Road. I won't call it the new name for this road, but Saddle Road we call it, where there isn't at least 30 mile an hour winds, 15 to 30 mile an hour winds every day. Now, a truck going down the road, if there's depleted uranium dust that has been fallen back down into earth onto the path where they drive these trucks, and that stirs the dust up again, and where's the wind going to take that dust? That's why we have, for the last 10 years, have been asking for air testing, and they won't do it. The state of Hawaii won't do it. State of Hawaii Public Health Department won't do it, and the military won't do it.
Well,
so we are working toward getting the funds to do our own independent testing.
Yes, well, and it's lucky that you're doing it that way, because even if they did agree to do it, they could easily fudge the results and tell you that it was perfectly safe or something like that. And look, we did it. So what more can you ask?
That's what they have been doing, except that our experts on the line are calling foul. Now, we don't have access to the mainstream media, so most of the population here is saying, hey, they gave us the all clear, why are we worried about anything? And the thing is, those of us that are in the know of knowing that they're lying to continue their war games here. Now, I take another position. Before I knew about the depleted uranium contamination, I was focused on lead. Now, that was pretty easy for my research, because there's a multitude of volumes about the dangers of lead to children.
And where was that coming from here? Oh, from regular bullets?
Regular bullets. They send out thousands and thousands of them. Their dummy bombs are made of something, or they made of lead, and then they have a place where they pulverize the land with these practice. And if you keep pulverizing lead, even if they call them dummy bombs, you're pulverizing lead over and over again. What's going to get into the air? What's floating through those trade winds?
Yes. Well, may I ask you an atmospheric question? Do you know the predominant direction of the winds that come through that valley, and where does it bring it down this way, and also the water flowing out of there? Where does it come down to this side of the island too?
Okay, there isn't anything. I'll just say this in my best common sense voice. There isn't anything that happens on the top of an island, in the mountains, that's not going to affect it at the beach level. Water goes downhill all over the place. The trade winds are coming more from the north, and so when they come from the north, the winds are predominantly, and that's what the predominant winds are here.
The trades from the north.
It goes to Kona. But we're on an island. It swirls around. And when you get the southerly, then you've got the wind more directly going toward the Hilo side. Now, we've asked for testing. I know that up there. Now, I need to clarify something too. Now, the highest count that we got on Geiger counter was 75 counts per minute. We got 65, we got 55, we got 20, we got a little bit higher, and we've got a lot of normal background radiation. This is small radiation. In Gulf War I, they dropped 375 tons of depleted uranium on an unsuspecting country. In Gulf War II, in the shock and awe, they dropped 2,200 tons of our nuclear waste into their backyard. Birth defects are gone off the charts there. Also, part of the problems with the bad health over there are the U.S. sanctions, keeping medicine from coming in, keeping the equipment from coming in to repairing the needed facilities to make food and clean water and et cetera and so on. So it's really a horrific kind of genocide. Now, what we're experiencing at this live fire training range, we don't know what they've done up there. They hide under national security, and we don't know what's up there. That's why we're asking for an accumulative testing of the whole area. We want the air testing because of the DU oxides.
Is there there's not an airstrip up there, is there?
I believe there is.
So they could land planes up there.
I believe they do.
I was just wondering if
Not
there was a way
big planes.
not cargo planes, but a way to monitor the weapons, the artillery or whatever they might be bringing there. But if they can fly it directly there.
I don't have any information on that. You know, I've been told that there is massive, massive caverns dug out. That what is actually on top of the land is really pretty sparse. But I've been told that there are, and that's just rumor.
Yes.
I have no idea if that's true or not.
Well, let me ask you this. When I interviewed Uncle Abel a few weeks ago, I think I mentioned this to you, he was talking about that he had heard that they were actually disposing of high-level radioactive waste in the lava fields. And I think I asked you about that, but I just, I mean, I could believe they would do it, but it would have to be brought in somehow and transported there. And another thing I read was that people actually saw trucks loaded with radioactive waste go into the facility of the geothermal facility near here and come out empty. I mean, it's all, unless you can back it up, we don't know for sure. But I mean, what if they're...
I've heard similar kind of rumors, and I think that I walk kind of a fine line between using common sense and being totally paranoid. It took me to hear the commanders lie, to believe that they would lie. And their EIS I took as the truth until I found out it was a lie. So once you've lied to me and you're a proven liar, how do I believe anything that you say?
Excellent.
And if you don't do the testing, then we will have to. And I don't know where we're going to come up with the money.
How much do you think that it would cost?
Millions.
Because you wouldn't
air
just...
testing will take millions.
You wouldn't just do it once. It would need to be an ongoing survey over a window of time or something.
Well, I don't know if Abel would have brought up this little situation. There is a court case, Kuching. And what Kuching did is he sued Department of Land and Natural Resources for violating the contract that they had with the military. And in that land agreement, that land lease agreement, they are supposed to clean up after every live fire training. Now, that's the agreement. That's a contract. They haven't done it. So they sued DLNR. Now, that course was heard 3 years ago, and it has not found a remedy yet. The judge has not ruled on it yet. And I think that's actually a really good sign. It really means that we have them in a tight position, that they have violated the land leases here. The military has proven that it is not. They will put out their propaganda that they're good caretakers of the land, and it's just a bunk.
Environmental stewards.
They are not environmental stewards. They'd like us to think that they are. But the truth is, for example, Koho'olave is a little island off Maui that was used for bombing practice by the Navy for 50 years. And they finally decommissioned Koho'olave, and they started a cleanup. And the cleanup was $400 million over 10 years. And during that time, one contractor was killed. You get too close to unexploded ordnance, and boom, you're gone. So one man lost his life. They did not touch any of the ocean. Now, in 50 years, how many of the guys practicing to shoot this gun off of the Navy ship, how many would miss? The underwater is just littered with old munitions that have been fired. They did in the 1950s, they did a test on Koho'olave. The Navy did this, where they simulated an atomic bomb using TNT. And I don't know how many pounds, tons.
Well, that's
of
what
TNT.
That's megatons is 1 million tons.
Well, in any case, this test cracked the water table on Koho'olave. There's no fresh water on Koho'olave.
What year was this?
That was in the 1950s.
Really?
Yeah, that's so they have not been good land stewards. Now, this $400 million, one reporter said that it was like 10% of the surface area. And there are some areas of the island that are they're not accessible. It's impossible to clean up. Now, Pohoakaloa is on my island, and since Koho'olawe decommissioned, they're putting a lot of their training up there at Pohoakaloa and increasing it and growing bigger and bigger. Now, my problem with that is lead and depleted uranium, and the fact that the military commanders have not shown any honesty, credibility, integrity, or accountability for the pollution they create. My mother always taught me to clean my room, okay? They're not good land stewards, and you can only take so much of this toxic metal buildup, and it's been 75 years. I say enough already. 75 years is enough. It's time to just decommission. We will deal with the cleanup. We're of course going to want to pressure you to clean up your own mess.
But if they could at least stop adding more.
At least stop adding more, and the depleted uranium that's on the ground when a new dummy bomb hits it, the power of that could ignite it. The power of the force of the bomb hitting it could ignite it. And then you've got another little aerosol, little fire going on, and you're putting it into the atmosphere, and the trade winds are going to carry it where? Over us. And even if it carries it a long distance, if you're not going to prove the testing and have it stand up to our experts, and if we say foul, you need to reevaluate how you're testing it, because we don't trust you. We don't trust the state of Hawaii. We don't trust the state of Hawaii Public Health Department. We don't trust the military in having them resolve. It's like the drunk taking care of the bar. They're not going to they're going to continue to do what they've got to do to promote their warring agenda, to go.
I wanted to share with you two I consider to be the best films that this guy ever made. His name is David Bradbury. He's an Australian filmmaker who I actually got to meet him a year ago. But I think his best work was two films he made around 2003, 2004. One was called Blowin' in the Wind. It's about depleted uranium. And then he chose two Dylan songs, Blowin' in the Wind, and then his next film was called A Hard Rain. And they're both looks at the global nuclear scenario pre-Fukushima. And he ends up blowing in the wind by looking at Shoalwater Bay, which is off of northern Queensland, and it's where they have the Sabre Talisman War Games every couple of years. And he ended up interviewing this young family that lives close to there that had 2 or 3 beautiful, healthy babies, and then she all of a sudden had one that was deformed, and they live right, where the wind and stuff would blow, from where they used this massive amount of depleted uranium there. So this is, it's sort of like a miniature version. It's like the southern Iraq region of Australia. And his film, A Hard Rain, and, to me, this is his most important work. But now he's kind of like, I think that you especially might appreciate what he's doing now, because he's sort of focusing more on a kind of a human interest journalism that looks at people, some of whom are actually quite like yourself, that are kind of involved in creating awareness and going around and protesting and stuff like that. And he's made 2 films, and one of them is an interview with these Quaker women that have gone and actually got arrested. They've chained themselves to gates and different kind of stuff like that. And then another one was this guy that went inside this secret U.S. spy base in Central Australia called Pine Gap. You might have heard of that. It's got it's like an electronic surveillance place, but it's been there since the 1970s. And he got in there with some kind of farm implement and started destroying a helicopter to protest. He wasn't just out of his mind. He said he was doing it to protest the American presence in Australia, and stuff like this. And then now he's just got done making a film called America and Me, where he went and traveled all around America interviewing vets and people that were protesting the military stuff. So, it's maybe he can come here and interview you.
Oh my goodness!
But then there's also, to me, the very best source of information about DU it's a film out of Germany called The Doctor, DU, and Dying Children.
Oh, I've seen that.
And that's a brilliant film. The doctor smuggled a live artillery shell into the lab, and they arrested him for spreading ionizing radiation because it was emitting so much gamma rays or whatever.
Yeah, it'll emit the gamma, alpha, gamma, and beta. And I haven't done too much studying on gamma and beta because our real concern is the alpha radiation of this low ionizing radiation and the impact of it. Like once it's been ionized and it's changed from the depleted uranium in solid natural form, if you can call taking U-234 and U-235 out natural.
Well, one of the points that they made in that film, the Dr. DU and Dying Children, was that in the DU that they analyzed, they found the presence of the highest level of radioactive actinides that are high level nuclear waste that they've added into there. They've added it into the tailings. So really meaning that the use of the word depleted is actually completely Orwellian. So, I mean, the bottom line is we know that none of this stuff is good, even though life has evolved in the presence of non-ionizing radiation, which is what light is. Without light from the sun, we wouldn't be here. And even elements like uranium, they're present in microscopic amounts in soil all around the world, and it could be that is essential for life at that kind of level. But when we mobilize it and concentrate it and put it in the wrong place and stuff like that, that's when everything goes haywire.
I totally agree. Now, one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you is because you live in New Zealand and travel all around interviewing people. And Pacific Rim is coming up. That's the RIMPAC, is the Navy War Games. It's the War Game Olympics.
I think we should call it GrimPack.
GrimPack is a better word for it. It's just got me really depressed. Caught my eye. I started, my focus has been on Poakaloa training area.
Yes.
That's in my backyard. So I haven't done much looking at what the military is doing in our oceans. Now,
it's mostly invisible.
Well, it's more invisible in the ocean in what they're doing. And it's a real rude awakening when they had their environmental impact statement, and I filmed that and listened to 40 people that came out to testify, and no one was in favor of these war games practice. It's every 2 years, and in 2016, they invited 26 countries to come and bomb Hawaii in their games. And it's really arms deals. They're making arms deals left and right.
They're advertising
off their weapons and puffing up their chest to go harm women and children.
Well, and what's ironic, Terry Lilly pointed out that the same few corporations manufacture the stuff and sell it to everybody, even countries that are supposed enemies. They're all using the same technology.
Money is money.
Absolutely.
Go team. It's a really sad scenario. Now, these RIMPAC, these war games in the Pacific, of course, the Hawaiian Islands are the most militarized islands in the world.
Absolutely.
And but they reach out. They go to Australia and they bomb the coral reef there, and they do their war game maneuvers. And I'm not an expert. Now, I do know, and actually it was through Terry Lilly that you found out about me, because I've been following him for a little while. He's a marine biologist in Kauai, and he's our eyes of what's going on under the water. And even on top of the land, depleted uranium after it's deployed is invisible except to a Geiger counter. Another thing that the military is not admitting is that this is a weapon of mass destruction because of this low level ionizing radiation. If it gets inside the body, it can stay in the body for decades, 6 decades, according to Dr. Lauren Pang, who he is one of the military men that I will believe on this subject.
Can you spell his name?
Dr. Lauren Pang, Lorrin Pang, capital P-A-N-G, Pang. He is the only person, he actually works for the he's the head of the public health department on Maui, of the state of Hawaii. But when he comes and educates people about issues that are concerning him, and depleted uranium contamination of Hawaii is one of his concerns, and also GMO and the Monsantos and the poisoning with the pesticides. But he's a real people's warrior, and I will believe him. He was 20 years medical corps. He was a graduate from Princeton in chemistry before he became a doctor. He was did 20 years in the military medical corps, so he knows how the military operates and how they kind of switch things around. So he is my mentor, my main mentor on this subject.
And you keep in touch with him?
Yes, when needed. And if I were to put a group of people together and ask him to come over and speak, he would do that in a heartbeat. That's the kind of relationship I have with him. I've worked with him off and on for many years. But he's got integrity. He's got honesty, and he wants
he's not a
to
necrophiliac.
tell the people the truth about what's going on, and we don't know how bad it is
Well,
because they haven't done the testing.
May I ask you this? This is sort of pulling back a notch and looking at this whole thing as, and I'm asking this as a question, what you think about it, because to me, there's a lot of evidence that this is or could be going on, but I'm not. It's the kind of thing it'd be really hard to prove. But there's been, all through the 20th century, back into like before World War II, they used to call it eugenics. And then it sort of morphed into population control and stuff like that. But it seems like that the basic mentality behind it is the same, that the people that share this mentality, they think that there's too many people in the world, and they don't want to just use birth control. They want to use active measures to create depopulation of the world. And one of these could be the spread of ionizing radiation as a form of genomic warfare.
And you want to know what I think about that?
Yes.
I think you're absolutely right on. I think that the depleted uranium, this low-level ionizing radiation, is the perfect weapon of mass destruction for them to accomplish a depopulation goal, because it's invisible after it's deployed, and the military has so much wiggle room that you'll never tie your illness back to them as causing it.
With anything, you can't really do that.
And you were right, it's very difficult to prove, though their University of Northern Arizona did some studies, I think this was 2005, because of the uranium miners and the high risk of illnesses that they have. They found that it was the heavy metal characteristics of uranium alone, not even looking at the radioactive component, can get in and deform cell DNA. So when you're talking about deforming the biosphere of the human body so that you can't replicate, or what you replicate is retarded or disabled, or that makes me cry.
Me too.
That makes me cry. So
The people know that they're doing this on purpose.
there are people
I know.
that know that they are doing this.
People
on
may not be
purpose.
the right word for them, but they're members of our species.
That's why I educate. Now, in the 14 years I've been involved in this, I got so frustrated with the system, the illegal, corrupt system that is here in Hawaii, that I started a nonprofit so that I can continue to do this education. I mainly am a people educator. I teach on the side of the road. I don't do the politics anymore. I don't write letters to the editor anymore. I just put up big signs on the side of the road saying, hey, we still have a problem. And we'll share my mana'o. Now, I'm not an expert. I studied this for 8 years. Does that give me 2 doctorates? I'm not an expert, but I know that there is a problem here and that they are lying about it, their involvement in this pollution. So my stand as the president of Stop Bombing Hawaii is it's time to decommission all live fire training ranges in Hawaii. Now, in a couple of months, RIMPAC's coming up, and I wanted to interview with you, Jeff, because you're from New Zealand. And I did a little looking for pictures about whales stranding themselves, and this picture popped up from February of 2017 that 600 pilot whales beached themselves.
If very
And
well
I was
spent.
just reading about how the U.S. Navy with the Australian military play war games on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, New Zealand and the Great Barrier Reef are not that far apart, and how far would a whale have to swim to get away from electromagnetic pulses, explosives going off underwater, sonar? If you having a mammal, a creature like a whale, or if you blind them with this big pulses of sonar, they can't navigate. They're blinded. I just wonder if there was any test done on those whales that beached themselves in New Zealand. Were they trying to get away from? I mean, why?
Well, I'll tell
Why
you,
would it happen?
the government of New Zealand does not allow that. What does that tell you? They don't allow necropsies to be done on whales that have been washed up. It's New Zealand, for all the public relations bullshit that they put out into the world. I know the place like the back of my hand, and I talk about this all the time. But the government there, ever since John Key came in after Helen Clark, that place transformed overnight into a new world order haven. They started inviting every oil company on the planet there, because New Zealand's got, in its exclusive economic zone, it's got more oil than the North Sea or Texas, a lot. It's got vast amounts of mineral resources like gold and stuff, and they knew it was there, but New Zealand had always had a traditionally conservative environmental policy. But under Key, they reversed all this stuff, and they've got some of the biggest populations of many different kinds of whales and dolphins all around, but they've got one of the highest stranding rates in the world. And like you said, you can't, especially the military, the last thing they're ever going to do is admit that something they did, created disease or something like that. Because if they even mention it, they've got to pretend like they don't know.
That's right.
Because if they even mention it, it opens a whole doorway for liability. Just like the Prime Minister of Australia, if they ever admitted that they willfully conducted genocide on the indigenous people there, it would open a whole wave of litigation. And so the same thing with whenever it's clear that all these whales and dolphins strand, and we can show the proximity of various military industrial activities, but when it comes time to prove it, the powers that be, the PR people for the Navy or the oil, they go like, it's a mystery illness. Scientists are baffled at what might have caused these strandings. You see it in every story about this. There was just a rash of whale and dolphin strandings in the past week in 3 different locations. I mean, this is like the thing I pay more attention to than anything else. And it's like, we could go to the next level of where I go with all this. I think that humanity has had its chance, but that as a whole, our species we're not heeding the warnings of the indigenous people, and we're just putting the pedal to the metal overall. And I don't think that we could stop all this even if we wanted to. I'm throwing this out, but I think it's out of our control. It's got so much momentum. When you add in how much of the military is completely automated, it's done by computers and stuff. I mean, it starts turning into a science fiction.
No, and there are a lot of science fiction shows modeled after this, so that when you bring it up as an activist, or I don't like the word activist. I don't consider myself an activist. I consider myself a protector, not a protester, a protector.
Well, you know what? And the Maori have a beautiful word for that. It's kaitiaki, Kaitiaki. Kaitiaki, it means a guardian, like a guardian angel or a guardian being.
Yeah. I don't know how to inspire people to get involved. I think that it's going to take masses of people standing up and educating about this. So I'm doing my part. I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell this person over here what to do. I am so profoundly impacted by the bigger picture, and that is our own extinction.
Well, and we're causing, we, meaning our species, we're creating pain and suffering and the inability to carry on their normal lives for maybe even the majority of larger life forms on this planet. And most of it we can't even perceive, like all the, the way, for example, that sound travels in the ocean, and all, most of it's totally invisible to us. And so a big part of what you and I are trying to do is to make visible, to create awareness and perception of this kind of thing to people that they're good-hearted people, but because this is just not on their radar, people tend to get too absorbed with what they're going to eat and where they're going to go on holiday and how they're going to pay for their house and their kids and blah, 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 all this stuff. And people somehow, their minds sort of never get out of that feedback loop.
Until it's too late. And so
when a catastrophic...
I hate to put my doomsday hat on, but I think that we're heading for extinction. If the military continues to do what it's doing around Hawaii, I'm just talking the Navy now, they're operating their electromagnetic pulses and their electricity and their sonar and God knows what else in a marine sanctuary.
But that's
it just
another...
can't be good for a marine sanctuary.
No.
And Terry Lilly has brought this out. And my focus has been on, again, the Po'akaloa. I really am not an expert, or haven't even read very much about what the Navy's doing. They, in their public hearings, one of the testifiers said that the EIS out of Alaska, the war games, they did an environmental impact statement and they expected 182,000 takes in the time these war games were going on, and I was under the understanding it was 11 days. Takes or kills. 182,000 takes or kills. Now I wanted to bring this up to you because you live in New Zealand. How many more whales strand in New Zealand? How many are stranding or dying? They're not even, these are just the big mammals that can make it to a shore and make a show that, hey, we're dying here. Why? Who is asking the questions? Why? And could it be the military war games? And if we don't stop it, what's going to happen? How sustainable is that? It's like they're not going to be satisfied until they've killed all of us.
Well, my friends, an organization of marine biologists called Stranded No More, I've interviewed them twice, and they make the point that they actually did a study that kind of proved this, that of whenever there's sort of a stranding event, the whales and dolphins, the ones that we see that make it to shore, are less than 10% of the total amount that would have been negatively impacted by this event, just because of the dynamics of the fact that they're out in the ocean and what happens to bodies when they're injured or dead, and so what we see on the shore. Imagine if the 600 pilot whales at Farewell Spit, what if that was 10% of the total amount that was affected?
We're killing our ocean. If our ocean dies, we die, period. If our ocean dies, if we kill our ocean as human beings and we allow this to continue, we're going to die.
Well, how about this? Did you ever hear of Dr. Rosalie Bertell?
She is one of
your
my
heroes.
mentors.
One of her last, I got an email from her a week before she passed away, asking me if it was okay, if she could have my permission to reprint part of one of my articles in the thing she was writing for the Ecologist magazine, because it was about the whales and dolphins and stuff. That meant so much to me. She was one of my heroes, and in her book, No Immediate Danger, Prognosis for a Radioactive Earth, she said, we don't have to commit suicide, because it's like it's already done. All the stuff we've already released, it's just like we're just beginning to see the effects. We're only the third generation to exist since all this radioactive stuff came into being in 1945, and it's we're probably just we're the experiment, and we don't even know what we've done, and we're still doing it.
I'm not going to be able to come up with this guy's name, but there was a Japanese scientist that estimated that between Gulf War I and Gulf War II would be 400,000 times Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anywhere they've deployed these in active combat, I know the radiation levels, like I'm complaining about it's just a little radiation of 65 counts per minute when the high radiation is 20 counts per
Well,
minute.
it's a global issue.
But it's low-level radiation, and what is it? If a particle in that gets into my body, it's going to cause health problems, period. It may take a while. It may take a decade. It may take 2 decades. Dr. Doug Rockey, now I learned of Rosalie Bertel on the same film that I was introduced to Major Doug Rockey. Major Doug Rockey was in charge of the cleanup after Gulf War I, and they were both interviewed in a documentary show called Poison Dust.
Yes, I've seen that.
And that, because they start the show off from the perspective of a veteran, and how veterans are getting kicked to the curb with this Gulf War syndrome, which is a wide variety of symptoms. And again, the military cannot admit that this is radiation sickness because of the liability that they would face by admitting it. But it's radiation sickness. Gulf War syndrome and all of it just makes total sense that these particles, they get into the lungs, they get into the body through the lymphatic system, float anywhere the blood circulates. If it settles in your knee, you're going to have a knee problem. If it settles in your reproductive organs, you're going to have problems with birth defects. If it settles in your brain, you could get a brain cancer. And these have been well documented, but tying it back to saying that this tests are very expensive, and back when I was doing that research, they had cited that there were only 3 labs globally that could do the right test. So then they tie your hands by keeping you away from being able to get the scientific data. And it's the same thing we're facing here in Hawaii as we try to collect and move forward to our own independent testing. Now there's another issue here, and the other issue is Hawaii is occupied. It is proven that the United States is illegal occupier of these islands and have been for 125 years. There's no statute of limitations on restoring a nation, and my efforts and my education of letting this be known, to continue to talk about it, to continue. I've been hacked twice on Facebook. I've been, they tried, okay, a little paranoid. They try to block the information from getting out there. I try a different way. But I'm going to continue to tell the truth that I've learned and share the knowledge that I've learned, and let people decide. The problem is activating enough people in enough time, because it may already be too late.
Well, may I share this with you? And to me, this was very profound. In 1986, I was at a place called Big Mountain in northern Arizona. We were there in support of the indigenous elders who were going to be relocated by Peabody Coal so they could strip mine this area where they had already dug out some of the uranium for the first atomic bombs. This is not far from Los Alamos. And I had a Geiger counter up there. Then that's when I met Thomas Banyakya, who was the Hopi elder. And he explained to us about the Hopi prophecy and Koyaanisqatsi, and if we dig precious things from the land, we will invite disaster. I was learning about this all for the first time from the Hopi elder himself. We were out of media touch for a week, and when we went back down to Flagstaff, I saw a newspaper in the distance, and it had the biggest headline I'd ever seen. And I walked over to it, and it said Chernobyl meltdown. The Chernobyl meltdown happened while I was up there learning about all that. And I remembered that Thomas Banyakya's words have echoed in my mind. He said that this is the fourth world, according to their cosmology, and that the world has been destroyed 3 times before by floods, fire, wind. The Hopis call it the day of purification, because 3 times before, human civilization got so far off the rail that it became a threat to all other life on the planet. And finally, at a certain point, Mother Earth and the Great Spirit go, look, we have to just wipe the slate clean. And they call it the day of purification. And he said that there's no way we can prevent that happening again, but that through all of our good actions and all the best loving things that we can do, we may lessen its severity, which to me would mean lessen the impact that it would have on all the non-human life forms that would also get taken out as collateral damage by whatever Mother Earth has to do to get rid of us and all our nuclear waste and all of our cities and weapons facilities and all that stuff. And those words have just echoed in my mind.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
So we can't stop doing all the good things because it
Well,
does
no,
matter.
when I meet my maker, I have a clear conscience. I'm sure that there are people in the government maybe not have such a clear conscience. The problem is their density doesn't allow them to see anyway.
Yes.
So, we watch them. We listen to what they say, and then we watch what they do. Now, I'm in, whether or not it ever happens in my lifetime, I support everything Hawaiian. I support the First Nation people, the Kanaka Maoli. They've been suppressed and oppressed enough. This is their country. I am a settler. I'm here to help. And this is the way I help, by doing this education and usually not as emotional as I am right now, but
But it's beautiful to see. We're in God's temple right now.
this is a beautiful location
Isn't
for
it?
the interview. First time I've been here. Old growth.
Well, we've got about a minute left for this broadcast of On the Brink Radio, and Lindafaye, it's so lovely talking with you. But let me ask you this. If this broadcast was miraculously going to be seen and heard by every human being that's alive now, what would you say to them?
No matter where you are,
If they could understand English.
then translate it.
Yes.
Because no matter where you are, we're dealing with life-threatening issues, whether it's from a corporation down the street or whether it's the military, the United States military being the biggest polluter on the planet, to get involved. Not with me. I'm just a one person. I don't have any followers. I mean, I have friends. I'm not looking to ring my bell. But we need to stand up against these injustices. We need to open our eyes. We need to really see the light. Turn off mainstream media. Look at the, or how you're being manipulated to think and feel a certain way. Do your own research. Think for yourself, and get involved. I have this fun saying that I like to say. Sometimes I have wished that I could not unlearn this and go back to sheep. But once you do learn it, it's impossible to go back to sheep. And I need to keep doing and keep educating and hope to inspire others to get involved. Because if not, we're doomed. If we don't come together and protect the planet, we're doomed. And all First Nation people on this planet have that deeply ingrained in their soul. Join them. Join them. No matter where they are.
Thank you for that. Now, I wanted to ask you, I know that on top of Mauna Kea is the largest installation of observatories on the planet because of the combination of altitude and the remote location of the Hawaiian Islands. And there's probably over 30 different instruments there owned by many different countries, possibly including the military. But now I've heard of this thing for the past couple of years called the 30-meter telescope. And when I came here a few weeks ago, I didn't even know if it was proceeding or not. And I knew that there was a lot of opposition to it from the indigenous people here. And so what can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, the mountain is sacred. And in legend, they call Mauna Kea the Pico. P-I-K-O, Pico. The Pico is like your Ambiblicus. It's your source. And it's sacred to the Hawaiians. Now, many of the indigenous people, they go, oh, well, you can't have your church be the whole mountain. Yes, you can. In ancient Hawaii, only the holiest of priests could even go up to the top of the mountain. They had a lake up there called Lake Waiau. That was their telescope in the ancient times. They would be looking into this glacier lake up into the stars.
Really?
Yes,
They look.
that's
They
the
see the.
stories that I've heard. Now, I'm not an expert, and I don't know a lot about TMT because my focus has been very narrow on Pohakaloa. I don't study too much of what the military is doing. I've just been really focusing on what's going on in my backyard. Now, there are many problems here, and it's all tied to the occupation because they don't own any of the land here. All of the land's been stolen,
Well, is Hawaii actually a state?
not legally. Not legally. By the time the 1959 came around, they had already been colonized. And according to international law, it's illegal to colonize a country that you're occupying with your citizens. Crime. War crime. All that colonization. So the Kanaka, and many Kanakas gave up and became Americans. That's their choice. Now, I am a colonist, and I'm choosing not to be an American because I know the truth, and I can't live with that truth. I will not support criminals. So there's the issue that they don't own the land, and it's been mismanaged, whether it's through the state of Hawaii and the university. So there's the land issue. They don't need another telescope up there. They like you said, they've got so many up there already.
Who is behind this one?
I wouldn't be able to give you the names.
Okay. It's probably a consortium from different countries, I'm guessing.
Yes. And it's a big business deal.
Well, it'll be the biggest one
Now-
in the world, won't it?
That's what I understand. Now, the problem is the observatories that they've had up there already have been mismanaged. Now, those lenses are held together or balanced on balloons that are filled with mercury, and they've had more than
What?
one spill
For
up
real?
there. For real.
I didn't know
when
that.
they deflate those to clean the lenses, there have been spills up there. Lake Waiau is polluted. I
With
think
mercury?
there's even been, I don't know what it's polluted with. You know, again, my information is sketchy. This is just word of mouth, different stories that have come my way. Now, the contested case, it also has to go with jurisdiction. You know, they don't have any jurisdiction here. They just steal, and they continue to steal the crown lands. They continue to develop it. We don't need a 30-millimeter telescope in Hawaii. We don't need any more colonists in Hawaii. And unfortunately, it's the colonists that are coming in are the only ones that can afford the housing. Housing is off the charts. I can't afford a regular house. I have lived for the last 20 years without electricity, without civilized plumbing. I compost, without running water. And part of it is an experiment that I'm living this way to see if the grid goes down, how will I survive? And I survived quite well over the last 20 years. Now, not to say that, anyway. So it is part of a humbling process for me to understand the Kanaka Maoli's point of view. It is their land. They need to be in charge. They're the consummate environmentalists. They need to be put back in charge of all of the land here. We don't need any more hotel resorts. We don't need any more golf courses. This is all being, there's a big push. We don't need any more military here. Now, they say the economy of Hawaii is two main industries, and that's tourism and the military. It's totally false that the military is a big money thing. It is a big money thing. But once you add up the cleanup that it will take trillions of dollars to clean up Pohakaloa. Trillions of dollars.
Well, if it could even be done.
If it can even be done. And some scientists have said it can't be cleaned up. So we'd like to take our chances. Just stop bombing it. So stop building or trying to. And this is just as much against the state of Hawaii is criminal as the federal government is here in overdeveloping and the greed for wanting more. The problem with wanting more is you can never fill that cup. because there's always more to want. And living simple, pulling back from civilization is what I've done. If the grid goes down, can I survive? The federal government in the last 10 years has closed twice, to my knowledge, and I wasn't affected by that at all. But my Social Security check kept coming in, and as long as they honor that contract, I will be okay, because I can live off that. It's poverty, but I can live off of it. But if they violate their contracts, and that's the scary part, is because they don't honor their contracts. They don't honor treaties that they've made. They have they break contracts all the time. And it's time for a reckoning, and I think that that's coming to a point. This, the land issue, the land lease up at Pohakaloa, it should be violated. They should not be extended. They do a lot of these things with meetings behind closed doors, so we have to stay on top of it. As far as I know, the contested case about the TMT, the 30 millimeter telescope, it's not dead. But they have not moved. The other location, I think, was the Canary Islands for this telescope. And they haven't moved yet. So there could be things and workings and goings on behind the scenes that I don't have any clue about, and that it could resurface and they end up putting the telescope up there. I mean, this is the way they've done to the Hawaiians from the beginning. They shoved them aside, shoved their needs aside. The fact that they consider the whole mountain a temple, who are they to judge what a Hawaiian calls his religious temple?
Exactly. Well, do you think it's possible that that because of the height of Mauna Kea, that the 30-meter telescope can actually focus down and look and see exactly what North Korea is doing? I'm just joking. It's just a joke. But that's not much more insane than a lot of this stuff.
No, it really is not. And the thing is we are kept in the dark as to military tactics. The thing is we are headed for our own extinction if we don't stop hating someone, anyone. Hate them because they're Muslim. Hate them because they're black. Hate them. That is what's heading us to the extinction more than anything else. We need a shift. Now, warring mentality is a low, slow vibration. When you can raise it to aloha, I do this because I love the people. I do this because I love our planet. I do this even though it makes me cry, because it's the right thing to do. Work to protect the planet. Work to protect the babies who are innocent. Work to protect the whales. That's honorable work.
You're a true kaitiaki.
Well, I have a clear conscience when I meet my maker. What will you do?
Well, we're with her right now.
Well, and every person needs to ask their own question. What will you do? What will you do? Because I can't do it alone. We need help.